Did it's midweek already. Good morning and welcome. I'm Maupe Yusuf.
Well, bright, up and early. Good morning and welcome. I am Bukola Koka.
Don't worry. Be happy. It's the 9th day in the month of August. I'm Ayo Makinde. Welcome.
Okay. Yeah. So, yeah, go ahead.
It's very interesting, you know. Just yesterday, going through the news and seeing what happened in Lagos, you know, the police, for some reason, has been in the news or in our own news for a few days now. And I think we've had cause to talk about them, if not just in the paper review. We've had cause to talk about them because of what the AIG of Zone 2 said about illegal checkpoints. I think he was actually briefing on the murder of the aide of a senator, and you know the press took the opportunity to ask him a few questions. But just yesterday, the police also, paraded an unusual suspect. This was a 10-year-old girl, and when she was questioned, you could obviously hear the innocence in her voice. This 10-year-old girl was said to have just arrived from Ilorin, the Kwara State capital, where she was living with her mother and was sent to Lagos to live with an aunt. And the aunt happens to own a shop in the market. But part of what this aunt sold was drugs, hard drugs.
Wow.
And she used this 10-year-old girl as a courier. So before she leaves for the market, this 10-year-old girl is asked to hide this illegal drugs somewhere on her body because, of course, she's 10 and no one's going to suspect her of anything. And, transport the drugs to the shop where the aunt sells these drugs. And it was just disheartening to see that, people will, even though I know that people say the hunter learns to shoot without missing, and the bird must learn to fly without perching. Sometimes the proverb works the other way around, since I don't know, whichever way you want to look at the proverb. But sometimes the fact that people involve children in illicit, and this is not the first time we've seen it, the NDLEA will tell you about their experience in unraveling the unusual places that people tend to keep drugs. We've seen it in baby diapers, we've seen it in baby food, we've seen it in, things that are supposed to be innocent. And it was seen that nothing is sacred anymore. And that's what happened in this particular instance. But I think for me, what took my interest was the fact that, the report said, oh, the police arrested a 10-year-old girl. I was just wondering, I hope that the police is not going to charge this 10-year-old girl. Will she be charged? Will she not be charged? When they know who the actual brain behind this is, the adult who bears responsibility for it. But a lot of things went through my mind, and we just thought to bring this out to the public, that, when we see this sort of situations, or when we know that such a thing could be happening, it raises many questions as to what responsibility we bear towards young children who are involved in such a situation. For instance, this also affects family dynamics. There'll be questions as to how this young girl now will, be perceived within the family. Will she be sent back to her mother? Because oftentimes these kinds of situations arises where, parents give up their children to go and live with a relative whom they feel can do better by that child. Maybe send the child to school, maybe give the child an education, just generally look after the child. How is this going to work now? Very big questions. But I do hope that, whatever happens, the best interest of this child will be looked after. But we just thought to bring this out here for you to also weigh in on the matter and perhaps also give advice on what needs to be done. Bukola and Ayo.
Only parents, maybe parents would be able to relate more with what you're saying about this this particular situation, as if the children don't have enough problems that they are dealing with. One of the things that comes to me readily is the health challenges that they have been facing. I don't know the number of times we have raised the issue of, out-of-school children in this country. One of the most susceptible category of people to a particular disease in this country of ours, perhaps also all over the world, are children. I mean, it was just yesterday also, Malcolm, that, that report came out about the malaria vaccine that's been talked about for quite some time. And right now we understand, it is being discussed, in Nigeria. We've been talking about malaria eradication for how many decades now, for as long as I can remember. If memory serves me right, sometimes even pre-independence. And a number of countries have been able to eradicate, malaria. As if that's, is not problem enough for us to deal with. We have this kind of situation on our hands. So someone will cite, what do you call it now? Someone will cite challenges, economic hardship for that. Purpose, right? But then, how about the little child? Is there any consideration for those children in the first place? Who is going to take care of whatever issues are surrounding this one now? This malaria thing, for instance, we also understand that that's, it only has, this malaria vaccine only has 12 months protection from experts that have spoken about it. 60%, a little over 60% effective. So in other words, it's not even 100%. And the skepticism with which people, go to hospital is also highlighted at that event of yesterday, where just 41% of people, were sampled, said they will go to the hospital. Not even up to 50% are willing to go to the hospital for what? Malaria. As if all of those are not enough. And then this. Because I don't know.
Starting from the rear, Ayo, what also caught my interest from the malaria report from yesterday was also that survey report that revealed to us that only 41% of persons in country report malaria symptoms. 22% would rather go to a medicine shop. 22% would report to a pharmacist, while 11% use dongoyaro. I believe that's the herbs that is being referred to. So, if, according to that report, yet again, the malaria vaccine only gives a short duration of protection, which is about 12 months, it goes to suggest that we all must take responsibility for our health, particularly in a country where there are high cases of reports of misdiagnosis that, in some cases leads to tragic and untimely deaths. It's cheery, even though it's coming a bit long in the day. Some months after the provisional approval was given for the R21 vaccine, but it's cheery. But more importantly, we must take responsibility for our environment. We must clean our gutters. We must clean the canals. We must observe, a high sense and practice of personal hygiene, not just for ourselves, but also for our children. We must not rely on this vaccine, which will still go through clinical trials before it's now approved for use across the country. Speaking of personal hygiene, that also goes to, teaching our children. And I can't ignore that report from yesterday as well about the unusual suspect, using the words of, Malpe. By the way, the young girl, according to the Police Public Relations Officer, Mr. Benjamin Hudein, will be returned to her own family, so that she'll be given a second chance at life. That's the report we got. So she's not going to face any form of prosecution. She's a minor, by the way, and I believe the laws, to a large extent, protect them, even though they may face some form of penalty in rare cases like that where they are found in questionable circumstances. But it just goes to show the minds of certain adults. And such reports, similar reports abound, by the way. The other day we heard from Rivers State about a man who sold his 3 children for 1.5 million naira. The other day there was also another report about a man who sold his child, I can't recall the states now, such that the proceeds will be used to send the others to school. You know, perversion doesn't start from minds where they do all sorts of unquestionable things with children. This is perversion. I wonder what those adults think, you know, how they, you know, subject children to that kind of trauma. If nobody gave them a chance at life, would they be, you know, grown to that stage where they can realize their own dreams, however minimal those dreams are? We must do better by our children. We must give them a chance at life. We must allow them to be children while they're children. We must give them an opportunity to go to school, grow up in a balanced environment. It's really, really sad that, you know, a woman who subjects a child to that kind of, criminal circumstance, so to speak, which could go a long way to leave a lasting impact on the mental state and well-being of that child. Besides giving that child a second chance at life, I dare say that that girl needs some form of counseling. Chamberlain.
Well, it's, time's changing real quick and fast. And look, at this point in time, we know we're all buffeted from every side, trying to make ends meet, running from pillar to post. But I think we all just need to sometimes take a step back, just be observant about your environment, just look out, because the times that we're in now, it requires such. Because all of these issues that we highlight and keep highlighting, just imagine if we were to approach things just a little differently, looking out for someone, the next person right there, having society pulled together. There's so many things that can change. And look at it, as I say that, for example, just pour through my head without even highlighting the story of the person who jumped into the lagoon in Lagos. Look, they're just different things, really. But who knows? I mean, you see that kind of story, parents involving their child, and you can't deal. But that's the world we are in now. So thankfully, the police will let her go. And look, guys, you've highlighted a lot, but it's a lot to take in, really. But I think it's good to know that we need to pull back because sometimes, we could be guilty of focusing too much on the political happenings and ignore things that affect you and I on a regular basis. Just looking out for the next person, not knowing what they're going through. When you drive on the roads there, people are going through things. Just take it a little bit easy and look out. You never know whose life you may be saving. You just never know. All right. That's it. Let me just start off with New Telegraph this morning as we take you through some of the dailies. And again, it's a challenge, a scenario that is supposed to play out today. They've been at themselves. They've been going at this for some time now. It's FG NMA matter. Now it says FG NMA beg resident doctors shelve strike. Nigerians dying, can't care for themselves. Well, yes, it's the lead story, and then you see the first of the riders here. Doctor's body urges speedy conflict resolution. NARD cancelled planned national protest as Senate intervenes. So, there you go. So hopefully we'll hear a lot about this today as we progress on the program, get some understanding in terms of what transpired, how did they arrive at this, what's going to happen next, all these kind of narratives, just to know that you get the right information out there. And guys, remember when that news broke too about that pharmaceutical company exiting the country, and then the implication of that, I thought that some authorities should have been speaking up on this matter, but who knows, maybe they're studying the entire scenario. But yes, that is the lead story on the front page here today. And then this, Niger ECOWAS issued 7-day ultimatum, not Nigeria, ascribed to Tinubu. You know, the thing about information and what happens with it all. Yes, you know, because Nigeria heads ECOWAS, and so even some persons will just say, well, yeah, of course, since Nigeria heads it, this and that could happen, but there are other members of ECOWAS and their countries. So no matter what happens, no matter how financial, or the kind of financial contributions they bring onto the table, they are still members of ECOWAS. They deserve that kind of respect. So you can't just paint the whole scenario in one brush and say, oh, you know, Nigeria is, no, we share it. And the president is trying to draw that distinction now. But other CBN to sanction entities, individuals with links to Cubist, to host regional meeting tomorrow. Tomorrow is Thursday, isn't it? Okay, yeah. So that's the day that they have scheduled for this to happen. So of course there'll be a lot of focus concerning how ECOWAS approaches this one. Stop fighting proxy war for Western countries, ACF tells ECOWAS FG. So how did ACF come to this kind of conclusion? Once sanctions lifted, OPS lists implications of military option and then sanctions. And then, you know, well, people are entitled to their views, and they. So you
and
sometimes
the understanding of situation.
Which is part of what I was saying yesterday. Look, what kind of information do they have? Because those up there, yes, they do have all of that information. But of course, when they take it, people, based on what they know, will ask questions. So it's up to those who have taken that decision to then explain to the people so that they can understand and be on the same page, because I imagine that they want everybody to pull together. So if they want to do that, then they need to shed a lot more light and not heat on this subject matter. But of course, you have different folks or different strokes for different folks. That's New Telegraph today.
Well, we're taking a look at leadership this morning, and here's what you have. Maize shortage. You're talking about stories that affect you and I.
Yeah.
It's not funny, because you think, okay, is it not corn? We can plant corn now. Just yesterday, yesterday I saw in front of somebody's garden, and I used that word, garden, you know. In front of the house, people like to plant flowers, right? Beautiful flowers. And this person had, alongside flowers, corn, you know, maize, if you like. And I said, well, this is not a very bad mix. Flowers you can eat. In 3 months' time, he plucks his corn, eats it, and then he removes the stalk. His flowers are still there. So how is it that we have a shortage? But this is what we do. I mean, this is what we have. We have a shortage. And that's what leadership is reporting this morning. Maize shortage. Nigeria's $4.2 billion poultry sector on brink of collapse. So this is not something that is to be toyed with at all. It's not, if you, just in case you're thinking this is corn season and you're seeing roasted corn on the side of the road, how come it is that we don't have enough for our poultry sector? And you know how it affects chickens, it affects the eggs. You notice how small eggs are.
Pharmaceuticals.
So
it does, yeah.
And even the alcohol industry, if you must go there. So this is what we have now. It definitely means that there's room for everybody.
That's a lot, $4.2 billion.
$4.2 billion poultry sector on brink of collapse. And you see it right there, the infographics that they have for you. 25 million sector's crisis puts over 25 million jobs at risk. 12 million, Nigeria's maize production declined to 12 million metric tons in 2023 from 12.5 million metric tons in 2019. So opportunities abound everywhere, and we need to see how we can make those opportunities work. Page 4, again, is where you get the details. You also have a number of other stories right there. 19 countries to benefit from ECOWAS, $338.7 million off-grid electricity project. The story is on page 7 of the paper. Look at this. Sultan Kuka blame insecurity on injustice, bad governance. Page 17 is where you find details. And of course, they also have that story. Federal government begs resident doctors to shelve strike. job racketeering, 35 MDAs, Colo-Shan Reps probe. Page 7 is where you find details on that investigation that's currently going on jobs racketeering by the House of Representatives. And this obituary broke yesterday. Pastor Taiwo Odukoya, the lead pastor of Fountain of Life Church, a 67-year-old pastor, dies in the United States. May his soul rest in peace. I'll leave it there for leadership newspapers.
Amen. And the body of Christ mourned yesterday following that announcement, ode to a gallant general who impacted many lives and birthed many other ministers. May his soul rest in peace indeed. Let's turn to this Nigeria and take a look at some of the stories that they have for you this morning. And it leads with that meeting with between the NLC and the leadership of the National Assembly. Subsidy, NLC meets Akpabio, rejects Gbajabiamila's panel, says no meeting 2 months after removal of subsidy. That's interesting. We perhaps need more explanation in that regard. Would have thought that those meetings that, the labor leaders and representatives of the federal government were having were yielding results. But that's what we have for you here. No meeting 2 months after removal of subsidy. And under that, you see this one, Lawan, Musa, Yari, Tambua, Oshomole, 68 others emerge Senate Committee Chairman. That's a page 7 read. And there's also this one that emerged from the news yesterday. Man jumps into Lagos Lagoon from Lekki Ikoyi Link Bridge. So Third Mainland is not only, that jumping spot anymore. They're also jumping from Lagos Lekki Ikoyi Link Bridge. It speaks a whole lot to mental health and, how we just need to be our brother's keepers. We gathered that the man was a dispatch rider. And I don't know if there are reports of him being saved, but that's it for that story. And at the bottom strip, lastly, for this Nigeria, ECOWAS ultimatum in Niger, not Nigeria's mandate, says Tinubu, orders CBN to sanction individuals, entities relating with the junta. We heard that from the spokesperson to the president yesterday. Let's leave it there for this Nigeria.
And switch to the Guardian newspaper this morning, something that's been a concern to a host of Nigerians here and there. Fear of foreign debt defaults takes toll on banks and economic outlook. Definitely something to give a little attention to. That ranking you see on the front page, countries with the highest default risk as of 2022, is talking about the vulnerability of countries. Nigeria is number 24 on that list. If you take a good enough look at it, and of course the source is also right there. You need to pick a copy of the paper so we don't let it all out. So that's the lead story of the Guardian newspaper this morning. And a host of other stories that will definitely pique your interest. That's the Guardian newspaper today.
Well, taking a look at Vanguard next. FG's reliance on borrowing must end, ascribed to Tinubu. So, promises to end Nigeria's over-reliance on loans, sets 18% tax to GDP target in 3 years. Inaugurates Presidential Committee on Fiscal Policy, Tax Reforms, Subsidy Removal, raises Nigerians' revenue to GDP by 2%, ascribed to the World Bank there. So, yeah, that's what you see here. They also have that story about the strike. So there's just a lot of funds that needs to be plugged and loopholes that we need to, for instance, today we also see that Niger, Togo, Benin, they owe Nigeria 43.4 billion naira for electricity bills. You beat that? Just so many things going on in different parts. So, Tinubu committed to improving citizens' welfare, ascribed to Okonjo-Iweala. So, There you go. That
Yeah, it was good to see her visiting the president yesterday.
Yeah.
Look at this. Daily Trust is the next paper I'm looking at for you. ECOWAS slams fresh sanctions on Niger. That's on the lead story on the front page of Daily Trust. Junta rejects diplomatic overtures, names ex-minister prime minister. ACF wants sanctions lifted. No option taken off the table. That's according to Tinubu's spokesman. We're pushing for negotiation. That's according to the United States. So that story is also right there on the, well, you know, this speaks to unity in Nigeria as well, unity of purpose. You know, there needs to be a little more cohesion on the Nigerian front. It does appear that this is actually exposing more of our fault lines, this sanctions on Niger, than, you know, showing that we're actually putting up a united front. Many more issues to look at. Page 4 is where you find details. You also see this. Labour passes vote of no confidence on Gbajabiamila-led committee. Okay, it's a big one. Page 27 is where you find details, and you have a number of other stories. Tinubu, yeah, you've seen it there. Tinubu vows to end over-reliance on borrowing for public expenditure.
We already owe a lot.
Kwankwanso, not your mate in politics, NNPP tells Ganduje. So that story is also right there. You have a number of other stories at the bottom here. List of 45 confirmed ministerial nominees transmitted to Tinubu. So will he be waiting for the remaining 2 or 3 to be confirmed before he inaugurates his cabinet?
Or will there be more than 2 or 3 more?
Big question. You know, take your pick and keep your fingers crossed. Please don't hold your breath. This is not the time to hold it. Page 6 is where you get details. Let's leave it there for Daily Trust newspapers.
And take a look next now at the Nigerian Tribune. It also leads with, you know, a follow-up on the coup in Niger. ECOWAS slams more sanctions on Niger. Tinubu directs CBN to impose financial penalties on individuals, entities linked to coupists. It's a page 3 read, and that's the first of the riders, by the way. Lift sanctions on Niger. Dialogue with Nigerian coupists. ACF Council's regional body. Military junta refuses ECOWAS AU-UN delegation today. And right under that big story, you'll see this picture. It's an interesting one. The president and members of the Tax Reform Committee, particularly the 400-level Miss Agbaje, 400-level student, rather, university student Miss Agbaje, who is a member of that Tax Reform Committee. It's interesting to see that the administration is including young persons on you know, in its cabinet. And above the nameplates, there's also this one, Kano Yobe, top 27 affected states as diphtheria kills 137, infects 1,534 persons in 14 months. That's ascribed to the NSCDC, so we must do better with our environment and be wary of diphtheria. Let's leave it there for the Nigerian Tribune.
The Nigerian News Direct has this one on its front page, also talking about the debt profile. Tinubu moves for tax reforms to end over-reliance on borrowing. Excuse me. Target 18% tax to GDP ratio in 3 years. Inaugurates Committee on Fiscal Policy. Tax reforms for revenue. Crisis rocks mining sector amidst hustle for revenue. Are we going to have that conversation where the state and the federal government can agree? And shareholders accuse governors of arbitrary abuse of Mining Act. All of that you'll find packed on page 3 of the paper this morning. Lagos targets $10 billion investment to boost electricity supply to 5 million homes. Dear Governor, according to your data, we are more than 20 million in Lagos. So what you talking about? Okay.
He has heard.
Okay. Right under the nameplate, well, beg your pardon, right under at the bottom of the picture of the page, Among other stories, brain drain, we're ready to absorb returning doctors in our military hospitals. That's according to the Chief of Army Staff. Now, ain't that good news? That's one of the stories you find right there. Of course, that story about Pastor Odukoya is also there. And then a police arrests woman for using 10-year-old niece as drug courier. That is also, of course, something we highlighted earlier in the day, and which is also right there on the front page of the Nigeria News Direct. And that's the much of the papers we can take this morning. So we're back right after now. That tax reform's being talked about. Exactly what do you need to know? What do you need to expect? That's up when we return from this break. Do stay with us.
Corruption in our society. There is a popular phrase in Nigeria right now: let the poor breathe. This ceremony is in the bid to make that happen. It is the inauguration ceremony of the Presidential Committee on Fiscal Policy and Tax Reforms. Highlighting the need for revenue as government works to discharge its responsibilities to its citizens, the President emphasized the need for a sound fiscal policy environment and a fit-to-purpose tax system.
Our target is to improve Nigeria's revenue profile while making the business environment more conducive and internationally competitive. Our aim is to transform the tax system to support sustainable development, while at the same time achieving a minimum of 18% tax to GDP ratio within the next 3 years.
The committee is mandated to address the fiscal challenges facing the economy, focusing on 3 areas: fiscal governance, tax reforms, and growth facilitation.
We cannot continue to tax poverty when we should be promoting prosperity. We should no longer tax investment or production, but focus on returns, incomes, and consumption. This government will tax the fruit, but not the seeds.
Speaking with journalists afterwards, the chairman of the Presidential Committee said the mandate of the committee will include reforms across the 3 tiers of government.
That fiscal governance also says we have to ensure we have coordination in terms of within the federal government itself, and also horizontally or vertically, I should say, with sub-nationals, particularly state, but also local government. And that's exactly what we hope to be able to do.
The World Bank country director, who was present at the ceremony, spoke positively about some of the steps taken by government.
Just the fact that what His Excellency did on his first day in office, which is eliminate fuel subsidies, that already added close to 2 percentage points of GDP to government revenues. Just because otherwise Nigeria was losing about 10 trillion naira per year to PMS subsidy.
The president has mandated the committee to come up with quick reforms that can be implemented within 30 days. They also have a mandate to ensure that they come up with critical reform measures, which will come up and should be delivered within 6 months and implemented within 1 calendar year. So for the committee, their time starts now. From the Presidential Villa, Lanre Lasese, Channels Television News.
Yeah, and so the chairman of the Presidential Committee on Tax and Policy Reforms, Fiscal Policy Reform, joins us here in the studio, Mr. Taiwo Yedele. Good morning. Thank you for coming on today.
Good morning, Shembadin. Good morning, Malpe.
Good morning.
Well, yeah, as Larry said, the clock is ticking, heavy on the task, your action points, what you need to do first in 30 days, and then you also have to come up with this in 1 year, then I see a 3-year plan. So give us a broad perspective now. How are you approaching this?
Thank you very much. So, like the president said yesterday, the work of the committee is divided into 3 broad areas. One of it is fiscal governance. The second one is revenue transformation. And the third one is growth facilitation. So what do we mean by that? If you think about the fiscal governance for Nigeria, it will range from issues to do with, debt limits. Do you respect the ratio of deficit to GDP as you have in the Fiscal Responsibility Act? How do you even report the revenue that you generate? And more importantly, the quality of spending. So I can tell you I've constructed a road. Quality is not good. We spend 5 times the amount. Those things do not build trust with the taxpayers. How do you connect with monetary authorities and other policies, economic policies, handshaking properly with fiscal policies? How do you connect within the federal government? How do you connect with subnationals? Because at the end of the day, the federal government is doing the right thing, but the local government is not. My life is still complicated as a Nigerian trying to live legitimately. So that's fiscal governance. Then revenue transformation, clearly, we need money. And the whole idea is, how do you raise revenue without increasing the burden on the poor? And for me, that seems really very clear and simple. Simple in the sense that as of today, we have what I call significant tax gap, estimated in the region of 20 trillion or even more naira. Because if you focus only just on the few major taxes, value-added tax, corporate income tax, personal income tax, there are loads of people who are not compliant, particularly middle class and the elite. Some of them are in the tax net with 1 or 2 fingers. So you pay 1,000 naira as tax when you should have paid 10 million naira. If you bring all of that into the tax net, in fact, our plan is to repeal many of the taxes that currently make doing business difficult without introducing new ones and yet collect more.
Music to the ears, go ahead.
Yes, and the other way we think that we can raise revenue is, even though our revenue collection from taxes is one of the lowest in the world, ironically, our cost of collection is one of the highest. So, and the reason for that is because you've got all manners of agencies. At the federal government alone, level alone, we had 63 MDAs that were given revenue target last year. No, actually, 2023 budget. And 2 things that will come up from that. On one hand, these agencies are being distracted from doing their primary function, which is to facilitate the economy. Number 2, they were not set up to collect revenue, so they won't be able to collect revenue efficiently. So move those revenue collection functions to the FRS, you gain 2 advantages. The cost of collection and efficiency would improve. These guys will focus on doing their work, and the economy will benefit as a result.
If I could just get clarity on that.
Yes, please.
So does that mean that all those agencies that usually announce, well, we have, 3 trillion, or we're targeting to collect 4 trillion, and this and that, that one shouldn't be happening anymore?
We don't want them to do that anymore. So just if you're custom, focus on trade facilitation, border protection. If you're NCC, just regulate telecommunication. You're not set up to collect revenue.
Because it makes it look as if they're in competition with the private sector.
Exactly. It can still be your revenue. We're not going into that. It can be your revenue and someone else can collect it for you. And there will be more transparency because you see what is being collected and it's accounted for properly. It's also a way of holding ourselves to account as to how we spend the money we collect from the people. So that's what you find. And then even incentives. If you look at it, we have all manners of incentives. If you do a cost-benefit analysis, some of them don't make sense anymore. Maybe they made sense 10, 20 years ago. Just rationalizing that in itself also gives you a lot of savings. So the third leg of this work, which is the growth facilitation, is we're going to be very intentional in looking at the details. They say the devil is in the detail. Exports, import, doing business locally, small business, micro, nano businesses, large ones, international investors, everyone is important. What are the impediments? Why is it difficult for you, for example, to even raise finance in the capital market? How can you ensure that if you hire labor, one of the things that the president has said is we want to create about 1 million jobs in the digital economy. And I can tell you, the tax laws as they are today, we inherited from our colonial masters. But that's not even bad enough. They also inherited it from the League of Nations over 100 years ago. The world has changed drastically since then, such that today I can sit down here in Abuja and work for a US company. We haven't met physically. I'm not working on Nigerian projects. And I earn my dollars, everybody's happy. Today, you cannot do that in Nigeria because our laws presume that if you have an employee in Nigeria, not only is that employee liable to pay tax, which is fine, the employer, wherever they may be, must come and pay taxes in Nigeria. So what the American employer will do is, if Kenya will allow me to do that without creating trouble for me, why do I hire Nigerians?
Yeah. So all of this that you highlighted, so how is it that, I think the timing for the life of this committee is a year.
Yes, correct.
And a lot of these things are governance issues, both at the federal, state, and local government level. So is it that your committee is just to come up with those policies, the framework, then government go and implement? Because if you do it in 1 year and you exit, aren't you supposed to find a way to keep tabs and ensure that they are following with the intendment of those policies that you come up with?
Yeah, very good question. Yes, so I think first and foremost, we think that there's a sense of urgency in dealing with issues we have to deal with. And I have to also tell you personally, I think that if you don't do what you have to do within the first 2 years of an administration in Nigeria, you get distracted. So we set the 1 year time frame purposely. I want to demonstrate the sense of urgency. This committee is not going to be writing reports and submitting them and hope and pray that somebody would implement. No. The mandate is from day one. You come up with an idea, we discuss it with stakeholders, which could be the president, it could be NEC, the governors and governors forum, it could be anyone, joint task. But once you get the agreement, you go ahead and implement. Now, what the president wants us to do is within the first 30 days, there are those low-hanging fruits. People have generally agreed that this is a problem that you need to address, but nobody has done anything about it. Personally, for example, this is not, promising that it will be done. I think that we should suspend VAT on diesel because of we remove fuel subsidy on petrol and prices are going up. So what can we do?
Would you accept that?
No, we're going to table it before the committee.
Okay.
So those are the things we want to do within 30 days, for example.
All right.
Now, 6 months is critical tax reform. So what we do in those 6 months is we're going to be rewriting some of the laws, actually. You see executive orders, you see regulations. If it has to do with states, we go to NEC or Governors Forum, we get their buy-in. We even plan to create templates for them. For example, tax harmonization law. So every state should just have one law that covers everything collectible by local government and the state government, and it should be online and transparent. So we'll do that template for them, which they can just adopt, or they can adapt if they want. And then 1 year is for implementation. But the interesting thing is the 30 days, the 6 months, and 1 year will run concurrently. Now, at the end, I would agree with you, it's ambitious to do all of this in 1 year, but let's see, we want to push ourselves and see where we get to in this period of time.
Yeah, because I was just looking at the speech which you gave yesterday, and I was saying, well, big goals here. But let's take up some of the issues which you raised. You said our fiscal policies could benefit from better crafting grounded in data and evidence. So it does suggest that for many years we've just done it, without data, without evidence. How do we intend to go about, do we have to collect data first? What do we have to do first before, this framework can now start to be built?
Yeah, great question, Mark. Yes, so this, I've been involved, even though I haven't been in government until now, I've been involved with supporting government with policies and this for over a decade. And one thing I can tell you for free is people, more often than not, propose policy changes based on their own lenses. So if you have two friends and they are rich people and they are complaining about something, you just amend the law for them. If you think that banks are making a lot of profits because you know two banks that have made a lot of profits, you haven't bothered about the rest, you say let's tax them, excess profit. So I think it was Michael Deming, I'm not sure if I'm getting the name right, who said that in God we trust, all others must bring data. So this for us is so critical. We're going to be asking for data and evidence. And then we're going to be doing impact assessments. Sometimes what happens also with policies is you target the wrong taxpayer, but the incidence is with someone else. The very good example was when Donald Trump said, let's tax the Chinese. The Americans said, let's go for it. And then Donald Trump imposed import duties on items from China. It turned out the Americans were the one paying the tax. So we have to do all of that, data, evidence, impact assessment, and sufficient engagement with the people to make sure that you're not just doing it for yourself, but for the people.
I know we don't have too much time, but let me see if I could take some examples.
Okay.
Because you said you have 30 days and people need to feel some of these things.
Yes.
The banks, for instance. Now, when you do a transfer, they charge you this electronic money transfer levy. And then at the end of the month, we're charged again on account maintenance. Now, the banks, even when you use POS too, they also charge you for that particular one. So now, plus VAT at the same time in all of those transactions. So no matter how many times you do it in the month, all of those transactions are charged, VAT inclusive. So why then is it that at the end of the month, it appears as though those taxes are duplicated when they come through and then charge you, even though they tell you it's current account maintenance, they still charge all over again those that you have charged. Even when you go to, say, the common man, for instance, you go to a restaurant, you eat, you swipe. They charge you for the POS transaction plus VAT. Then they charge you for that transaction with your bank for that particular one. Then at the end of the month, they still charge you for account maintenance. Now, those companies themselves to pay some form of tax. So it appears as though something needs to be done about all of those. Is that part of what you're considering?
Yes, it is. So one thing that the president also said, which I think is important to just remind people, is we do not want to tax poverty. We do not want to tax investments. We do not want to tax production. Instead of poverty, help people and businesses create prosperity and share in it by way of taxes. Instead of taxing investment, wait for the returns on the investment. Instead of taxing production, wait for the consumption. And then don't tax, the president said, we're not going to be taxing seed, we'll tax fruits. So what that means is in the design of financial transactions, one, you need to even ask yourself, if I'm going to give you cash, today I won't pay any stamp duties or bank charges. So you're encouraging me to come within the financial system, then you impose, in my view, like away. Penalties, So this is not something that is entirely within our purview, but that's why we have the central bank involved in this project. So we're going to be speaking to them. We're going to be having engagement with the banks as well. So first, in terms of the taxes, is there a way we can establish thresholds? And we did that already with stamp duties. It could be something that says, based on data, I'm not going to call any numbers now. Based on this data, people transacting at this threshold are poor. So exempt them from the taxes. And then it has to be between the CBN and the banks to then say, why do we need to charge them? Sometimes you see SMS charge, you say, but I don't want the SMS, but you charge me, and then the amount is so much at the end of the month. So those issues we would also look into them.
Another example is that, for instance, some states came up with this policy saying, well, the taxes they collect is federal tax. So they came up with theirs, maybe tax on consumption. They say, well, if you buy any food or anything, you have to pay tax. because they claim that the ones that are collected generally is for the federal. But we also do know when FIRS gets these taxes, or when states collect taxes remit to FIRS, at the end of the day, it gets into Federation account.
Yes.
And then it's shared, and states collect it. So when states collect that, they still collect the ones they get from their states. Whereas they claim that that one goes to the federal. So are we going to look into that as well?
Yes, certainly. In fact, this is a major area of focus for us. And it's one of the reasons why we said we shouldn't call the FRS the Federal Inland Revenue Service. It presupposes that they collect revenue for the federal government, whereas they actually collect revenue for the federation. Yeah. VAT, for example, 85% of it goes to state and local governments. Stamp duty goes only to state governments. But yet, when you do the narrative, it's easy to say, oh, the center is too strong, we need more powers at the state. The people would not know that you're sharing in that amount, and then you now impose your own again, and then punishing the people in the process. So what we plan to do is first to try and understand what the issues are, because in a way, some of the states also have legitimate concerns. I remember when Rivers State said, I'm here awarding contracts to build roads, some states are not doing anything, then you collect my VAT and you go and share it with everyone. So we'd address those issues. And then we also ensure that the way we even present, taxes that are collected, maybe we should just put next to it, who is sharing it, right? And then how do you get states to buy into, if you have a VAT, you don't introduce your own consumption tax. Interestingly, part of the mandate of our committee is to actually draft bills to amend the Constitution itself. Because some of these issues actually emanate from the Constitution, not being very clear.
Wow, and some people say Constitution, that's a very long journey.
Yes.
You know how long the Constitution takes to amend.
Yeah.
But, you've talked about how you're going to be looking at things horizontally, that's among federal government agencies, and vertically as well amongst the three tiers. Now, horizontally, some people will say that, but we introduced a treasury, because you talked about how you hoped that there will be more harmonization and more efficiency with the collection of taxes. The introduction of the Treasury single account, how effective was that in terms of trying to show, just which agency was collecting what, and, perhaps in terms of revenue, were there any benefits to some of the goals which you're looking at here that was introduced from the Treasury single account?
The answer is yes. The TSA was a step in the right direction. We realized at that point that there were MDAs with over 200 bank accounts. Nobody even knew how many bank accounts they had. I was speaking to a commissioner for finance of one of the states. Nobody knew how many bank accounts they had. And that was bad enough. So Treasury single account was progress of some sort. We haven't really built on it, in my view, since then, because you need to then go beyond the fact that you have the TSA. First, you need to deal with the exceptions and exemptions here and there. We need to get to a point where you don't make exemptions for anyone. I know that one of the problems we have is that you can get a budget for your ministry or department or agency, and it will not be funded. So you're afraid that if you have a crisis, just imagine NNPC, you need to put off fire on a vessel or something. You may not get the money on time. So everyone is then trying to make sure they, ring fence their money separately. I think we can deal with those issues. And beyond that is the transparency of even reporting what is it that flows into the TSA, including how that's been spent. If you consider, for example, that in the CBN Act, there's a provision that the CBN should give its surplus to the federal government twice a year, 75% of it. And then over the past 3-4 years, the amount of interest we've paid on ways and means alone is over 3 trillion. I haven't seen the flow back of that amount to the federal government. So some of these issues are things we need to then do beyond the TSA. So the TSA will help our work, but there is a lot more that we need to do to ensure that these things work effectively and they are sustained.
Do you sense that there could be any pushback when you look? When you look at the fact that you talked about incentives, the fact that agencies that have hitherto collected monies on behalf of the federal government have also been incentivized. do you sense that you could also come up against a pushback from agencies of government?
Yeah, there would be pushback. I don't think it would only be agencies of government. I think there will be pushback from any stakeholders that is benefiting anything, and you're trying to, take it away from them. They'll push back. What we're trying to do is to get everybody to see the bigger picture. If I'm successful in a country that is struggling, I'm a failure, right? Because you don't even feel safe. So you see houses in Lagos, and some of them look like the prison yard. So what if you then look at the long term? Because long term, actually medium to long term, everyone will benefit from what we want to do now. So the narrative for us is not that we're coming to take away what belongs to you. It's to find a more efficient way of doing it. And if we all agree that there are issues that do not benefit anyone, let's agree to take them off. If you have over 60 different taxes officially, unofficially well over 100, and only about 7 to 8 give us 99% of our revenue, federal, state, or local government, it just seems like common sense to me to say, why don't you repeal all those taxes that are creating more headache than yielding revenue result for governments?
All right, we'll go to a quick break, and then we'll be back and get a few more questions in.
Discover Lipton's flavorful and balanced taste. We pick fine quality tea leaves from selected tea gardens around the world to give you Lipton Yellow Label's flavorful and balanced taste in every sip.
We are passionate about two things in Nigeria. The first is football. The second is our rice. And nobody celebrates like a Nigerian. So, for every goal scored, every mark made, you can be sure to always come back home to rice. Celebrate with Nigerian Premium Big Bull Rice. Homegrown just like you. Big Bull Rice. Tasty rice. Nourished you.
The Duchess International Hospital caters to every aspect of the family's health needs. A one-stop shop for maternity and child health services, emergency medicine and critical care, medical and surgical subspecialties, dental and eye care, and a range of other subspecialties and services, all available at a single location right here in the heart of Ikeja. And it really doesn't matter if you're paying out of pocket using your HMO or private insurance. We focus completely on providing that world-class affordable healthcare for all the family at all times.
Lipton's flavorful and balanced taste. We pick fine quality tea leaves from selected tea gardens around the world to give you Lipton Yellow Label's flavorful and balanced taste in every sip.
Thank you for staying with us. Well, Dr. Ide, if this was a public hearing, I'll tell you to pick up your pen and paper and start taking notes of the questions that I want to ask you. But we are really, pressed for time because a number of things just come to mind. You've talked about the things that you want to do in the area of taxes, harmonization and all of that, speaking to the 3 tiers of government, federal, state, and local governments. SMEs have claimed that they pay all kinds of taxes, levies, duties, and all of that, all across the nation, particularly when they are moving interstate. You may have also seen that video that made the rounds of someone calculating up to between 30 and 60 levies and duties on the way across states. If you can hazard a guess, you've been doing this for more than 10 years, How many taxes, levies, duties, regulations do nano, micro, and small businesses pay in the country in one way or the other? And how many is your committee harmonizing them to?
Great question, Ayo. I wish I have the answer to your question. I can tell you authoritatively, no one in Nigeria, no one, not a single person knows how many taxes businesses pay. We did an exercise some years back for manufacturers, and the way we did it, which is going to be similar to what we plan to do now again, we just asked manufacturers to tell us the taxes they pay and provide the evidence that they pay the taxes, so they're not also not just making it up. And we counted in one state 197 different taxes and levies. You know, the video, I don't know whether you're referring to the same video. There's a video of a man who was trying to transport, I think they were food items, from one state to the other. And this guy counted 72 different levies and fees that he had to pay, of course. And then we are surprised that food is expensive. The sad thing is that even all those collections, you'll be lucky if 10% of it will get to government. Wow. So there's a burden on the people without the benefits of paying those taxes. So we don't know how many taxes there are. Officially, there's somewhere around 65 to 70, based on what we call the approved levies and taxes, law. So let's work with that. Now, SMEs are mostly, sometimes I think they're just people who are hustling, the way we say it in Nigeria. If you think about nano, micro, and small businesses, they're really, when we say the numbers of MSMEs in Nigeria, and you hear all these 40 million, actually, about 99-point-something% are the micro, nano, and small. The medium are really very few. So Nigeria's strategy in terms of taxing the informal sector and small businesses, in my view, is counterproductive, because you are chasing people who can barely survive, just keeping ends, making ends meet, and you're asking them to pay you a lot of taxes. What you find in most countries is you establish your threshold for exemption. If you use data to determine what the poverty line is today, and let's say that poverty line is, if you earn anything less than 80,000 naira, you live below the poverty line. The common sense thing to do is not to ask you to then pay tax to government and then focus on the top. South Africa last year, 2022, collected over 20 trillion naira equivalents from personal income tax alone. And more than half of these amounts was by top 1% of their society. Just imagine our top 1% just paying that 10 trillion. That would be more than 5 times what we've ever collected in Nigeria from personal income tax, despite being almost 4 times
Dr.
the population of South Africa.
So in other words, number, my apologies.
Yes.
If we are going by the number you gave, about 70-something taxes that are already being paid, is that number going to remain, or are you going to harmonize it down? That's the second leg of that question that you haven't answered. You may also please add the answer to this one. I mean, you've just referenced it in a way. What's the percentage of Nigerians that pay taxes? And is there a plan to expand that bracket? What's the incentive for paying taxes?
Yes, so to your first question, yes, we have a plan, a very ambitious one. And don't hold me to this, it's a plan, it's not a promise. Is that when we are done, all the taxes at the federal government level, state and local government level will be single digits. In other words, should not be more than 9. And we really want to push for this. It might be something that you achieve progressively over time, but that's the target for us. So all those 70-something, unofficially over 100, should come down to less than 10. To the second part of your question, how many Nigerians are paying taxes? Not many, at least paying directly to government, that gets into government coffers. A lot of Nigerians are paying informal taxes. I'll even say extortion in some cases. Beyond that also is that even when you go into the official tax net, let's say there's something called official tax net, in my view, you find a lot of people there, majority actually, shouldn't be taxed. They should be there only for information, data collection, and economic planning. So you have mostly the wrong people in the tax net, and the people that need to be there are either not there at all, or they're just there with one finger, like I said earlier on. If we take, for example, the fact that we're trying to administer, interventions, to cushion the effects of fuel subsidy removal, what most countries would do is, because they have the intelligence about what you're doing, your behavior on your phone alone, right? You load 200 naira in a whole month, and you flash people every time. You don't have a bank account, it tells me that you're poor. So you can get a credit directly into your bank account if you have one. If you don't, you get it on your phone, and you can use it for, say, food stamps. So this actually goes beyond just collecting revenue and harmonizing taxes. It also goes into economic planning. Beyond the number of taxes we want to reduce, we also want to reduce the number of revenue agencies trying to collect one tax or levy here and there.
Interesting. I'd like to follow up on that one, but I'll just leave it and manage our time. Dr. Udili, I'd like to talk about the concern of manufacturers and economic experts alike, who often bemoan that disconnect between fiscal policy and monetary policy. And one of the contradictions that they identify in that space is the ban on the 43 items from accessing Forex in the I&E window. I wonder if it's within the jurisdiction of the Tax Reform Committee to take a look at that and perhaps lift the ban on some of those items.
Yeah, brilliant question. Yeah, so we haven't had sufficient, coordination and handshake between the fiscal policies and monetary policies. The reason why the central bank created those lists of 43 items that are prohibited from accessing FX in the official market is because they feel like we don't have enough foreign currency. Why are you importing toothpick? Of course, that's a valid concern. But should the answer be that you stop them from accessing the FX market? I don't think so, because what that does is that it creates demand in the parallel markets, and therefore you have a margin or a premium between the parallel market and the official market, which then goes back to the same problem we didn't want to have, that can lead to arbitrage. What you should do is to allow everyone, so long as what you're doing is legitimate, to go to the official foreign exchange markets to bid. And for the things you want to discourage, you then impose higher import duties on them. So I still get the same results of discouraging you from importing toothpick without hitting up the foreign exchange markets. And if you do that as well, the other thing you would achieve is that the parallel market will stop being relevant. It will become a black market, which means that's a market to buy FX for illegitimate transactions like, corruption, proceed, trafficking, drugs, and whatever the rate is. If it goes to 2,000, nobody cares. Many countries don't reference their black market because it's irrelevant. But if you push legitimate transactions to that market, you give it legitimacy, and then people reference it. So we think that it's important for us to have that coordination between fiscal and monetary policy to address some of these problems like the one you raised.
Yes, indeed, Dr. Odile, and you're valid, about that concern to discourage the accessing of Forex for items that can be locally manufactured. But there are others, particularly some manufacturers, who say that they're local fabricators of certain raw materials, and they need to access, Forex to import those items. But foreign, investors who also do business in that area are allowed to access Forex. So I wonder if that disconnect can be addressed, and particularly if there'll be a handshake between members, officials of the Ministry of Finance and the CBN, such that they are going to be on the same page in looking at all of those items sufficiently for more informed policy decisions.
Yes, that's what we expect. In fact, the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria are a member of this committee. So also is the central bank. So we're going to be discussing these issues together and say what's the best way forward for our country. Of course, it won't be right for you to deny manufacturers FX to bring in inputs unless you think that those inputs are available in terms of the right quality and quantity in Nigeria. I think, one of the, my personal belief is you should not discriminate, against investors unless you are deliberately trying to protect your vulnerable sectors of the economy. Like we heard on social media, I don't know whether it's true recently, Now people now import adire from China. I say, why would anybody do that for God's sake? You know, so that is something I can ban if I have the powers. I'll ban the importation, not even impose levies. Don't import adire to Nigeria. Let people do it because you see a lot of families and households depend on that. We should be the one doing that and exporting it to the rest of the world, not the other way around.
Let adire factory here breathe.
Yeah, let adire factory here breathe.
Okay, so if I understand you correctly, we're going to see unification of taxes and levies, local government, state, and federal government, such that, I mean, they all know who is to collect what and what kind of taxes or levies are to be collected. Will that happen?
Yes, that's correct. Okay. You know, constitutionally, you cannot compel states and local government to do anything when it comes to their taxing rights. What we want to do is to put up a framework that, you know, creates an incentive for them to do what we've agreed that we'll do, and in a way also introduce some consequences for when they go outside of that. You know, details are going to be worked out later, but we are confident that this should work. Because sometimes what you find is one state will say, oh, it's a PDP government, it's an APC government, and they start doing their own thing. This is a national assignment. You know, it has nothing to do with politics and political interest.
One more thing before we go. Are we going to, is it within your committee's purview? For instance, we know that banks always tell us that, oh, your account is dormant, you need to do something about that, but we also know that when you then go in and transact, then they activate the those monthly charges and everything. It goes back to the banks. Are we likely to see a unification of all accounts? I know you did say something about NARD and ensuring that that platform is there. So will we see a scenario wherein people, whatever account you have, individuals, for instance, everything comes on the same platform, such that if it's there, if you're utilizing an account, everything cannot be said to be dormant?
Yeah. You know, I've always wondered myself why, you know, you have a savings account, you have a current account, and then they say your savings account is dormant because you haven't used it. And you are the same one person who's been using the other account. So I'll make a note of this. This is not one of the things we're looking at. And then we have that conversation with the monetary authorities to see how can we just simplify it. I know we made a lot of progress over the years. I remember the days when you could only withdraw from the branch where you opened your bank account, yes. So, yeah, I'm sure that's something that we should be able to address.
All right, we wish you the best as we go on this matter, because we need to see transparency even in tax collection, so that they don't come and slam you, well, you didn't pay this, you have to pay this, and you have no option, no choice. So we're looking to see all of those harmonized, so it's a lot easier for people to pay taxes. Thank you for coming on, Dr. Taiwo Udele, Chairman, Presidential Committee on Tax and Fiscal Policy Reforms.
Thank you for having me.
All right, well, back in just a moment. We're on to health now. The NARD matter, that is up next. Stay on with us.
I'm using this medium to kindly appeal to the National Association of Resident Doctors that please, Nigerians are dying in droves. That's the truth. The health sector is a very, very important sector. Not that any other sector is not important, they're all important, but we all know what medical doctors are to us. If we are ill today and you can't go to a hospital, what happens? People are dying, people cannot care for themselves, so I'm begging them and I'm imploring. And I'm lending my voice to the voice of all members of government who have appealed to them to please call off their strike and go back to work. I know that your parent ministry alongside other government agencies are working hand in glove to ensure that this matter is sorted out. We're talking about the lives of our citizens. We're talking about the lives of our children. We're talking about the lives of the populace who depend on you for medical services. And I want to reiterate this government's commitment to peaceful resolutions of all outstanding issues. In doing that, I assure you that the government will adhere to all approved standard industrial relations procedures and best practices.
Welcome back. Yes, Dr. Oji Innocent joins us next. He is the president, Nigerian Association of Resident Doctors, NARD. Good morning. Thank you for coming up today.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Okay, so the demands notwithstanding, first of all, maybe I think you need to tell us. So at the moment, we understand you've suspended this planned strike or protest. Is that the case?
Yes, we put on hold the protest that was supposed to start this morning, but the strike is continuing. We review again in 72 hours. That's the position of our National Executive Council.
So the protest was supposed to hold today. You hit the streets and everything. That's on hold.
Yes.
But at the moment, you're still on strike.
Yes, we are.
Okay. So why did you put on hold the protest?
Well, I think we should start with why we even plan to protest in the first place, because we started this strike just about 2 weeks ago. That was after a series of notices and ultimatum given to the government. And at a point, it looks as it was looking as if there was no movement on the part of government to resolve the issues that led to the strike. And being concerned about Nigerians, we felt that it would not be good to just remain on strike with government not making efforts to quickly resolve the issues so that we can come back to work. So our members met on Saturday and decided to escalate so that we can just enter the streets and tell our stories to the citizens of this country for them to understand what the issues are and maybe help us in talking to the government to address them. So that notice came out on Saturday, and we still gave another window for government to meet us and resolve the issues before the protest. And that was why, instead of starting the protest on Monday, we put it for Wednesday. And of course, yesterday, we had a meeting at the Villa. We also had one with the leadership of the Senate, led by the Senate President, His Excellency Senator Godswill Akpabio. And a lot of promises were made. In fact, at a point, they were even wondering why it took so long for government to address the urgent demand that we've been hammering on since we started this struggle.
I thought that what the ministry was begging, the Ministry of Health, is that you suspend the strike, but you put on hold the protest. Aren't you encouraged by the meetings that you've had with government officials? Were there no signs indicating that, okay, something may be in the offing?
You see, the Ministry of Health has not spoken to us since we started this strike, unfortunately. If they say they have done that, then we need evidence, because what we know is that, like I said, when you have an association agitating for very germane issues, even if they have gone on strike, as government, you still try to meet them, at least to reduce the duration of the strike. You don't just go and sit by and watch things deteriorate. And of course, when some other government officials are making efforts to resolve the issue, you still have a few individuals who want to prolong the issues by taking measures that will necessarily aggravate the problem. And our members felt ashamed that that was the position some people were taking. And of course, that even led to the plan for the protest, because we saw what they were doing.
Who exactly?
No, you see, some of the government officials who are supposed to call us to take responsibility, to start addressing the demands, they didn't call, and...
Who are you expecting to call?
We have a parent ministry.
Ministry of Health.
Ministry of Health. And like I said, they didn't call us since we declared the strike. They were just issuing statements.
Does it matter that there isn't any minister yet?
The permanent secretary of the Ministry of Labor, you just said that she's not, you see.
But they said they have a threshold, that they can't approve certain things because your demands falls under the threshold of the substantive minister. So they can't do it.
We have 8 demands, and I've been saying this. The most important demand is actually for government to recruit doctors and nurses to replace those who have left the system. Because I keep saying it, our members are suffering. Nigerians are suffering too. When you don't have the right number of doctors in the hospital, there's no way it's not going to affect the healthcare service delivery system. And nobody has come out to tell us that what we are saying is not true. Government on its own set up a ministerial committee that came up with a guideline. Since February this year, why hasn't that guideline been secularized? And people are still living. Do we rather wait until everybody leaves? Because the danger in not doing that is that even those who are outside waiting to be recruited are getting fed up and they are still living. So you may even get to a point where you release the secular, you won't see anybody.
So is there a guarantee that if it's secularized, doctors will not leave?
It will help to reduce the burden because if you finish your youth service as a doctor and you are quickly recruited, you may not have any need to leave. But when you wait a year or two, working in the private hospitals that don't pay much, of course, you start making plans to leave the country.
I think that we can go to our colleagues in Lagos now for their questions.
Well, thank you, Maokwe. So now, Dr. Oji, that the federal government through the ministry that you talked about is making an overture, and the Nigeria Medical Association, your parent organization, also is making overtures and saying there should be an intervention, that the federal government should do the needful, and NMA should also be considerate. What considerations would your big NARD should be considerate? What considerations would the NARD make in the light of realities? I know you've said, quite a lot about the things that the ministries need to do and all, but in terms of the employment, I don't know how much power the permanent secretary has if, for instance, there's an embargo on employment. So what considerations would the NARD be willing to make just to return to work while we expect a substantive minister in office?
Okay, we have started making the considerations because if not, exactly by 10 a.m. this morning, our members all over the country would have started this mass protest, which will actually be quite unfortunate for any country to allow their doctors to be on the streets protesting. I don't know the kind of image that we send out to people. As I'm talking to you, it wasn't even an easy decision. We had our NEC yesterday, and it finished just roughly about 8 hours ago. Our members were fully mobilized. They have printed banners. But out of respect for people who met us yesterday, the first meeting at the villa and the meeting with the Senate President, they assured us that the urgent demands that we have been talking about will be resolved in 24 hours. And so we gave them 72 hours. That's the first consideration. And I also need to correct this. You see, the secular and one-for-one replacement that we've been talking about is squarely on the table of the Office of the Head of Civil Service of the Federation. Like I keep saying, the guideline is there. It's just for it to be secularized. And essentially, you are not even increasing the numbers in the system. What that guideline is meant to achieve is that if 10 doctors leave this month in a particular hospital, you replace them with 10 doctors of the same cadre. Essentially, we are trying to help the system because if people are leaving and you are not replacing them, the system will shut down. We have departments in the hospitals across this country that have shut down, and they are not functioning. They are not rendering the services they are supposed to render because the doctors to man them are not there. And these things are verifiable. And so it's not something that cannot happen because the people that are supposed to do it are currently, it's not something that should wait for the ministers to be appointed. And we have received assurances that that will be done in a matter of days. And for the medical residency training fund, we have also been assured that it will be released in a matter of days. And so we hope that that will be done so that we can meet again essentially in 2 days' time to consider our stand again and possibly begin to take steps to put all these things behind us and go back to work.
Dr. Orji, the last time you were here, you told us, particularly on the one-for-one, circular for one-for-one replacement, you know, that a particular notice that was put out was grossly undersubscribed, which was a confirmation of my concern that if indeed the government, you know, decided to begin a mass recruitment, you know, tomorrow, the brain drain is a huge stumbling block because of the mass exodus of doctors from the country. I wonder if that has changed significantly since the time that you were here, and if it has not, what really is your recommendation, you know, to salvage the situation in that regard?
You know, we have medical schools in this country that still train doctors. And so what happens is that when these doctors come out, do their housemanship and youth service, if you don't recruit them, they will just leave the country. So I agree that releasing that circular will not even stop brain drain completely, but it will certainly help at least to stop those who are leaving because they are not gainfully employed from leaving. Then we have also said severally what government needs to do to address this brain drain squarely. There is no mincing words. Everybody knows, even the government know that the main reason for this brain drain is because of the poor remuneration doctors and nurses are getting in this country. And we have also we have also tried to be scientific about it, that the salary structure we are using now was approved over 10 years ago. Since then, we've had inflation, we've had differentials in exchange rates and the price of PMS. So there has to be an effort to put all these things into consideration and try to improve on this pace so that people will also look at it and stay back. There also has to be other incentives that government should look at that will help to keep us here. For instance, we are resident doctors. We are supposed to reside in the hospitals. It makes our work easier. It also helps us to be readily available to take care of our patients. But I can tell you that more than 90% of tertiary health institutions we have in this country do not have accommodation for resident doctors in the hospitals, and all these things impact on our work. You know, so it's about time that government should sit down with us and the relevant agencies to begin to discuss ways of addressing this brain drain, because it is threatening the continued existence of health sector in this country, and we believe that the current government has enough experience, they have the capacity to address this.
Also, there are some items that you identified as being within the purview of state governments, and we know from in recent reports that Ogun State, for instance, has approved the payment of hazard allowances for its doctors. Now, since your strike began in July, have state governments, you know, made overtures to the association, you know, to initiate talks on plans at least to meet that aspect of your demands, such that you know, considerations can be made for the strike to be suspended in some states?
Yes, I must say that many states governments are doing well. We are aware that Benue State government has paid their doctors the training fund for 2023. Ogun State has paid, Osun State has paid. We've also got information yesterday that Kaduna State is making effort to pay. Our members in Oyo State, they have also told us they are currently engaging their management, you know, to pay them. Delta State, we are informed, has also paid. And these states, they paid even before the federal government. We're also aware that Kwara State, as of last week, they were making effort to pay, and I think they have even been paid. So we want to, if all these states can pay, there's no reason why other states cannot pay. you know. And again, I want to go back to this issue of one-for-one replacement. As we are talking, even before we embarked on this nationwide strike, we have centers in this country that already embarked on strike because their management recruited doctors on locum employment, and they were not being paid. Obafemi Awolowo University Teaching Hospital, Ile-Ife, University College Hospital, Ibadan, University of Nigeria Teaching Hospital, Enugu, I think University of Calabar Teaching Hospital, and you have a number of them like that. They recruit doctors on local basis because they don't have waiver to recruit them properly. Some of them don't even pay them well. And then even the payment that they have agreed to make at the end of the month, you see them owing them. So many of them have been owed 6 months, and they are expected to be working in these hard times. So we believe that getting that secular and one-for-one replacement out will help to stop this from happening. There's no reason why doctors should be employed on locum basis when you know that the platform you are putting them into will not ensure that you pay them regularly every month.
Dr. Oji, just one more thing from me. Doctors build relationships with their patients. They have this personal, relationship that if they are not available, if certain patients don't see certain doctors, they sometimes turn down the overtures or intervention of any other medical practitioner that may be available to them. I don't know, how significant do you think that is in the concern that, a number of people are expressing, including the NMA, about this strike that is already ongoing? Because most certainly, not just the generic doctor-patient relationship is at stake here, but the personal relationship that some of your members of your association already build with their clients, with their patients, that they may not be able to go to anyone. So let's get a little personal. How is your leadership taking that into consideration, particularly for the patients?
Well, like I've tried to explain severally, it's actually because we love our patients, we want them to work. That is why we decided to embark on this struggle after several attempts to get the government to address the issues that have led to this struggle. We don't want to continue to see our patients die because we don't have enough doctors and other clinical staff in the hospital to take care of them. These things I'm saying are actually very clear, And for Nigerians who come to public hospitals, they will understand exactly what we are talking about. They are seeing the increasing waiting time in the hospital. They are seeing the cancellation of surgeries. And unfortunately, even sometimes many Nigerians will not understand. They will think it is our fault. They will take it out on us without knowing that, if you are supposed to have 3 general surgeons, for instance, in a particular unit, and you have 1, of course, the person cannot do the work of 3 people. And so it leads to cancellation of surgery. So it's because of this. And of course, even patients end up suffering immobility and mortality of inadequate care because of this inadequate number. And so it's very important that government should find a way of replacing those who are left. What is currently on the table is the one-for-one replacement. This is something they can quickly do to replace those who are left, to ensure that we have enough numbers to continue to treat our patients.
Well, and I'm sure there are a lot of Nigerians who would like to add their voice to yours, to make it even louder. Because I know that when doctors go on strike, it's not because they think that it's government officials who are being deprived of treatment. It is Nigerians, and they're hoping that Nigerians who are being deprived of treatment would pressure their, government officials to ensure that doctors are attended to. But it would seem that over time, this strategy is losing its strength, so to speak, with the consistency of strikes. I think a lot of Nigerians can actually, as you said, relate with the issues which you have raised, especially when they visit government hospitals. And I think it's even worse for those who are married to people like you, because they are the ones who bear the brunt of the frustrations that you feel, in the hospitals. And I'm wondering, do you think that sometimes you wonder at what it would take to really get the urgency? Because time was when we never really heard of doctors go on. Now you know, it's more frequent, so to speak. Do you think that, the not just the NMA now, but NARD would have to sit down and re-strategize? Because right now you have decided to, initially you wanted to go on a protest just before you decided to suspend it. And it would seem that got everybody interested again. Do you think that perhaps the idea could be, maybe we try a protest first before we go on strike? What do you think?
I agree with you. But you see, we are not seeing any other way, unfortunately, because you also know that protest has its risk, you know. And like I said, yes, maybe we'll be considering that, but it will be embarrassing if any government allows their doctors to hit the street in protest for things that can easily be resolved. Maybe we'll consider that. But apart from that, unfortunately, and I have said this before, people don't get to know the legwork that we do in this Abuja and indeed other states where we have issues before we get to the stage of like. Sometimes you literally spend weeks, days trying to get these things resolved. Even before we embarked on this strike, there was nowhere we didn't travel to, trying to meet whoever we believe will be able to intervene to get the people in the ministries to address this issue. But everything failed. In fact, we were not even able to meet those people. And like I said, even yesterday, I can tell you that for people who were around during the meeting, the government side, they were shocked that what we are asking for is even something that can easily be granted. And therefore, how are we allowed to go on strike? And yes, I agree that we may have had multiple strikes. But what is the reason? The reason is that usually when you start, they'll come and make a promise. And as a doctor, you look at your patients. You decide to take the promise and come back. After 1 month, 2 months, the promise is reached. This one-on-one replacement we are talking about, when we went on a 5-day strike in May, they put pen to paper. And I have shown that to some pressmen. We signed an agreement where it was clearly written that this circular will come out on or before 5th of June. The MOU is there. Everybody signed. And 2 months later, of course, that was why we didn't embark on definite strike then, because they gave us that assurance. Even this training fund, they told us that once they start operationalizing the fiscal year, the 2023 appropriation, that it will be paid. That started about 2 months ago. Why hasn't it been paid? So based on that, again, we shelved the strike in consideration of Nigerians. So why will government always reach an agreement with you and breach it?
So wait, are you saying that the demands right now is for their prompt response on the medical residency training fund and then the one-on-one replacement of doctors in hospitals?
Those are the ones we believe that they can quickly address. Then we have salary areas, skipping areas, but we are considerate. For those ones,
the commerce structure?
The commerce structure is being handled by the Nigerian Medical Association. They have raised issues with Nicola, and we are an affiliate of NMA. We believe that government should be able to address that. But apart from that, we have salary areas, skipping areas, which we want government to start discussion. Tell us the plan you have in clearing them. If it is satisfactory, we cannot begin to see that they must pay now before we suspend. We know it will take a while.
I just want to also ask you quickly as we wrap up this segment now. I don't think we can end this without, expressing our condolences to you on the recent demise of Dr. Wairi Diaso, who lost her life in an elevator accident. First and foremost, I do not know if the actions that have been taken so far by the Lagos State government. They set up a committee, and recently we heard that a number of people have been suspended as a consequence, or some even fired as a consequence of that particular accident. I do not know how the NARD is reacting to that particular incident and whether you are satisfied with what has happened so far.
Well, We have not gotten the details of what has happened so far, but we are aware that the Lagos NMA is handling that, and they have done so well. We trust in their capacity to be able to hold government to account because, honestly, like we said, it's a very unfortunate incident, and of course, that is part of the reason why we keep talking. There's no reason why you will keep house officers in a 10-story building without a functional elevator. And you see, a complaint was made about this some years back, and nobody listened. Now, the doctor has died because of that. So it's still part of what we keep telling government, that attention should be paid to not just personnel, not just remuneration, but infrastructure, so that people will not be losing their lives needlessly. So we believe that the NMA Lagos has done well, and we are confident that they will continue what they are doing to ensure that everybody who is culpable in this unfortunate incident is brought to justice.
All right, Dr. Innocent Oji, President, Nigerian Association of Resident Doctors, thank you for coming out.
Thank you very much for having me.
We're back in a moment. Stay with us.
Now, let me tell you about Safari Valley Eco Resort, the first of its kind in West Africa. Upon your arrival, you are introduced to your butler, who plans your itinerary.
We were surrounded by wildlife from the moment we entered the eco park.
So many activities, all in the same premises. Visit the gym or the stables, they have it all. At my break, I'm able to practice my putting.
We also went fishing on a man-made canal. Our tour guides taught us so much about the wildlife and how to interact with them.
They used only electric vehicles here. This creates a serene environment. I'm told it's over 1,000 acres. My cabin here sits on 2 acres with a large terrace space overlooking my private swimming pool. Now this is royalty. They have their own farms, thousands of fruit trees. I can also have my lunch here at the waterfall. Quite a beautiful place you have here.
Visit Safari Valley Eco Resort in Ghana, bringing you closer to nature.
A world of disruptions and rapidly changing business landscapes requires a cultivated mindset and strategic core competences to flourish. Equip yourself to flourish with Texem UK's strategic leadership for success in a digital age. Leveraging Texem's tested and proven methodology and led by distinguished faculty, Professor John Peters, Professor Paul Griffith, Ambassador Charles Crawford, and UK Member of Parliament Sir James Duddridge. The 4-day program holds on Doubletree by Hilton, London, from August 21st to 24th, 2023. Cost £4,469,750 after a 10% discount, covering study materials, 5 nights of hotel accommodation at Hilton, meals and certificate. For more information, visit www.texem.co.uk. Email exec@texem.co.uk. Call or text +44 7425 883791.
Texem, insights that inspire, actions that change the world.
Discover Lipton's flavorful and balanced taste. We pick fine quality tea leaves from selected tea gardens around the world to give you Lipton Yellow Label's flavorful and balanced taste in every sip.
Thank you for staying with us. Well, as you can see, Mr. Marcelo Keke joins us this morning to have a brief conversation on the state of the Nigerian economy. Thanks for joining us this morning, Mr. Keke. You know, we began the program this morning by talking about the federal government's tax and fiscal reforms initiative. What's your take on that to begin with?
Thank you very much for having me again. I must say that it's a good initiative. It's a good initiative at this point in time. Since it's also going to address the issue of revenue, funds inflow to public till, very important, because the immediate past Minister of Finance did say that the problem of Nigeria is not that of debt, but that of do revenue. And so I believe that this committee will address that. And two, the multiplicity of tax, that economic agents have been complaining about over the years. I also believe that the committee will address it, modify it in such a way that things are streamlined and not somebody or businesses will pay at federal level, pay at state level, and pay at local government level, taxes, levies, charges, surcharges, and all kinds of things. So I believe, and I believe strongly, given the leadership of that committee that I happen to know, that they will come up with something that will tidy that sector or subsector of the economy, and to do for the good of the economy going forward.
Well, that leads me to the next question, Mr. Keke. When you talk about multiplicity of taxes between federal government, state governments, and local government levels or tiers of government, one wonders, how do you suggest or think the committee will be tackling that harmonization process in a way that the federal government and the state governments will not have any form of tiff or conflict? Yes, they have talked about conversations, communication, engagements and all of that, but hitherto, I don't know how successful we've been at that. When you also look at, the purses that the federal government shares with some purses of the nation that the federal government shares with states, and how some state governments have had issues with the way it was administered hitherto. How do you see that conversation of harmonization of federal, state, and local government taxes going? How do you think it can be significantly addressed?
Once again, I can say that all that will be addressed given the confidence I have in the leadership of that committee. Somebody that I know that is coming from the private sector, has been a well-known name in that subsector, and that is from PricewaterhouseCoopers. So given his antecedent and the composition of the committee generally, and the president had given them some timeline that some kind of low-hanging fruits report will be made within 1 month, and another report within 3 months, another report within 6 months, and another report within 1 year. And so I want to believe that we're going to do a thorough job. So no matter what used to be the conflict, given time, given the experience, and given the fact that they will involve all stakeholders, all the state governments, all the local government, commissioners, finance, budget and planning at various levels of government. They are most likely to iron out whatever used to be the points of conflict. And there will be some give and take, in doing so. There will be some give and take in doing so.
Okay.
And I believe that at the end of the day, the economy will be the better for it.
Talking about the economy now, Mr. Okeke, tax and fiscal policies aren't the only challenges of the economy. What are those other sectors of the economy that you think need to be significantly dealt with? The federal government, the president expressed concern about the level of borrowing for public infrastructure, which has been a concern for people like you as well over the years. What other sectors or segments of the economy do you think need as urgent an attention and as quickly as possible?
Thank you. Many sectors or subsectors of the Nigerian economy need urgent attention. In fact, almost every sector. But to be specific, since this economy has oil as the mainstay of the economy, government should do everything possible to secure that sector and optimize what we are getting from that sector. I mean, something like this oil theft, that has become the talk of the day. The government should decisively deal with it. By all means possible, decisively deal with it so we can get what we should be getting from that sector, okay? And when we do that, government should also decisively deal with the importation of refined product. This petrol subsidy that is wrecking the economy, government should decisively deal with it, because it's like we get something with one hand, meaning what we get from oil sales, and on the other hand, we fritter it away. Even now that the subsidy is removed, the fact that more people are being licensed to keep importing has not solved any problem because those people who are going to import are still going to use foreign exchange, are still going to use dollar, and that will be putting pressure on the exchange rate of the naira. And so that will still be dragging down the economy. You understand? So these things need to be handled simultaneously. That's on one hand. On the other hand, our economy needs immediate, effective diversification. By that I mean reasonable income, foreign exchange should be coming to this economy through various channels. That at the end of the day, inflow from oil will account something less than 50% of federal government, foreign exchange income. That is what we are talking about. And to do that, government to have seriously emphasize export of non-oil items, which the central bank put a scheme in place, I think by February last year. And it's like the government has thrown away the baby with the bathwater when it canceled the multiplicity of exchange rates. It's like it also canceled the RT 200. That's what the central bank named it. So that should be resuscitated and adapted if necessary, so that export is encouraged of non-oil items. And so when this economy witnesses, high inflow of foreign exchange, in addition to what we are getting from oil, that is going to help us get the real value and the lower value of the naira exchange rate against the dollar and the other hard currencies. So once we do that, maybe on the other side, government will also be trying on a long-term basis anyway to moderate Nigeria's penchant and taste for foreign goods. You understand? So that will also be reduced. You understand? And then talking about the investment climate generally, that's where this taxation thing comes in. That is where the insecurity in the land has also to be tackled. As a matter of fact, that should be a priority because somebody has to be alive to do whatever business.
Absolutely.
Insecurity in the land, it has to be handled expeditiously. Thank you.
Absolutely, Mr. Okeke. And, economic diversification is an age-long song. But, the current administration has charted a path for itself in that regard with the declaration of a state of emergency on food security in the country. And just to tie it to what the Guardian newspaper trailed on this morning about the impending collapse of the poultry industry in the country because of the absence of maize. What are the immediate things that you want to see in that regard if, that state of emergency on food security will be the first response, to checking that, and indeed across board, every other type of high cost and scarcity of food in the country?
Once again, thank you for that question. Let me say that security is fundamental in all of this. Because when you talk about farmers and farming, I'm talking about food security, you know the situation of farmers in this country now, especially the places we call food basket, the various states and all that. They are the most attacked and hit, by the hoodlums or whatever they are called, So they have all, been removed from their displaced from their farmlands and residents and all that. And most of them are in internally displaced persons' homes now as we speak. So that is why I mentioned that government should improve security so that these farmers can go back to their homes, go back to their farms. That's on one hand. On the other hand is to say that that state of emergency that is declared and the amount that the president was mentioning, when he was mentioning the palliatives and all that, the whole thing looked like another campaign, kind of dropping amounts. We put so billion into this, put so billion into this, put so billion into this. The challenge in this economy is that it's like a repetition or a rehash of what we have had in the past. The Central Bank of Nigeria, if you remember, has been on with the Anchor Borrower scheme. That is like what the president had just said. But the challenge is administration of this fund. Which agency is going to administer it and achieve the desired result? You understand? Especially now that food security is everywhere. So our recommendation is that handle insecurity, know the institution that will handle it. Will you be able to bring back the money? What terms and conditions are you giving out the money? You understand? And so on and so forth.
We
have gone through it.
We indeed hope.
Not been able to recover even 50% of the money they gave us.
Yeah, Mr. Okeke. We must anchor it at that point, and we hope that, you know, either directly or by proxy, the relevant agencies are watching and listening to all of those very critical recommendations. Thank you so much, Mr. Okeke. Mr. Okeke is an economist who joined us via Zoom from Lagos. Thank you very much for your time on the program. And we have your own feedback this morning on so many issues that we have raised, starting with the resident doctor strike. Let's take this one from Darlington Mayor, who says, I am begging the NARD, that's the National Association of Resident Doctors, to call off the ongoing strike for the sake of Nigerians. People are dying daily because of lack of doctors attending to them. My wife is pregnant, likewise other women out there. They need doctors to attend to them. Please, and please, that's a passionate plea.
I don't know what else to add to that one. This one is from Shitu Oludare, talking about tax on imported goods. Let the Presidential Tax Committee set up, help us review the excise and duty composition on goods imported, especially raw materials. Also considering our population, we still rely on car importation. However, government keeps putting their legs on the neck of importers with multiple taxes.
Oh, this one is from Olagunju Oladele, who is talking about the tax policy reform. It says the way we set our tax policies in Nigeria can most times be seen as a system practicing trial and error on the average person. Monetary policies and unstable tax rates have influenced consumer spending patterns and business investment decisions in an economy where any product or consumable that goes up does not come down. I would suggest that the government implement the reduction in the benchmark of interest rate through monetary policy to encourage borrowing and spending by businesses and consumers.
And Dr. Huavi says the proposed revenue reform is important. The timing is slightly problematic. Whilst the government highlights 3 prongs, Nigerians want to know the order of priority. As touching on tax reform, the proposal for tax on consumption means increasing VAT. Increasing VAT will be counterproductive because of the direct, indirect, and induced effects of production. Well, I hope not, because I'm not sure.
I didn't hear him say that there was going to be an increment on VAT anywhere. So maybe that's just an inference, or maybe something the guest, beg your pardon, the viewer assumed might come as a result of that. But I think they're pretty emphatic that they're not looking at an increase on any of the rates just yet.
Spreading, bringing more people on the tax net and not increasing it. So I think that's the way to go. Well, that is the show today. We thank you all for watching. We'll see you next time. I'm Chamberlain. So.
Thank you so much for watching. I'm Maokwe Ogun Yusuf. Do have a great day.
Of course, we'll be back again tomorrow. Don't forget, join us again. I am Bukola Koka.
And I'm Ayo Makede. Have a wonderful day.
Ranking, and they don't call me world best for no reason. I only deal with the best. Be it auto or business, 100% claim is always guaranteed.
Welcome to World Class Insurance Services. Anchor Insurance, where insurance truly works.
Our schools have been attacked at different times. For adequate security, the Inspector General of Police, Acting IGP Kayode Adeolu Egbetekun, PhD, NPM, having established Schools Protection Squad, invites you to the formal launch of Standard Operating Procedure Handbook for the safety of secondary schools across Nigeria. Date 9th August 2023. Venue, Abuja Continental Hotel, Wuse, Abuja. Time, 10 a.m. prompt. Keynote speaker, Malam Nuhuri Badu, MNI, National Security Advisor. Special guest of honor, His Excellency Senator Godswill Akpabio, CON, President represent Nigeria Senate. Chief host, Acting IGP Kayode Adeolu Egbetokun, PhD NPM, the 22nd Indigenous Inspector General of Police. Facilitator, CP Basil Idegu, PhD, National Coordinator, School Protection Squad. Partners, Ministries of Finance, Education, Special Duties, and all security agencies. Announcer, ACP Olumuyiwa Adejobi, MNIPR, MIPRA, Force Public Relations Officer.